My parents told me the greatest wedding gift I could give my brother was to disappear. So I packed my bags, left town, and didn't look back. But when I returned 3 years later for my father's funeral, I discovered something that made me realize my absence wasn't just requested, it was planned. What secret was so devastating that my own family needed me gone? I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. I still remember the exact moment my mother said those words to me. We were standing in the kitchen of my childhood home in Portland, surrounded by wedding magazines and fabric swatches for my brother Derek's upcoming wedding. The afternoon sun was streaming through the window, making everything look warm and peaceful, which made what she was about to say even more jarring. "Elena, sweetheart, your father and I need to talk to you about something important," she began, not meeting my eyes. She was folding and refolding a dish towel, her hands never still. My father stood in the doorway, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. I was 24 years old, fresh out of graduate school with a degree in architecture. I'd moved back home temporarily while I searched for a job, and honestly, I was excited about Derek's wedding. He was marrying Vanessa Chen, his high school sweetheart, and I'd always liked her. I thought I'd be helping with the planning, maybe designing something special for the reception. I never imagined what was coming. "Sure, Mom, what's up?" I asked, setting down the invitation sample I'd been examining. She glanced at my father, who gave her a slight nod. "Derek and Vanessa's wedding is going to be a very important event for our family. There will be over 300 guests, business associates, Vanessa's extended family from California, people from your father's company." "I know," I said, confused about where this was going. "It's going to be beautiful. I've been working on some ideas for the centerpieces, Elena." My father's voice cut through my enthusiasm like a knife. "What your mother is trying to say is that we think it would be best if you weren't there." The words didn't make sense at first. I actually laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke. "What? You're kidding, right?" "We're not kidding," my mother said quietly, still not looking at me. "We think the greatest gift you could give Derek on his special day is your absence." The room suddenly felt too small, too hot. "My absence? Mom, what are you talking about? He's my brother. I'm his sister. Why wouldn't I be at his wedding?" My father stepped further into the kitchen, his jaw tight. "Because every family event we've ever had, you've found a way to make it about yourself. Your high school graduation, you had to give that speech that made everyone uncomfortable. Derek's college graduation, you showed up late and caused a scene. Aunt Patricia's funeral, I was grieving." I interrupted, my voice rising. "Aunt Patricia was like a second mother to me, and you're holding that against me?" "You sobbed so loudly during the service that people couldn't hear the eulogy," my mother said, finally meeting my eyes. There was something in her expression I'd never seen before, something that looked almost like disgust. "You made it about your pain, your loss, just like you always do." I felt like I'd been slapped. "That's not fair. That's not what happened. Derek deserves one day that's about him and Vanessa," my father continued, his voice growing firmer. "One day where he's the center of attention, where everything goes perfectly, where there are no disruptions or drama. And based on your track record, we don't believe that's possible if you're there." I looked back and forth between them, waiting for one of them to crack a smile, to tell me this was some sort of twisted test, but their faces remained serious, even cold. "Does Derek know about this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It was his idea," my mother said, and those 4 words shattered something inside me that I didn't even know could break. My brother, my older brother who used to let me tag along with his friends, who taught me how to ride a bike, who stayed up with me the night before my SATs helping me study, wanted me gone from his wedding. "I don't understand," I said, and I hated how my voice cracked. "What did I do that was so terrible? Why does everyone hate me?" "We don't hate you, Elena," my mother sighed, like she was exhausted by my existence. "But you have a way of overwhelming situations. You're too much, too loud, too emotional, too dramatic. Derek's wedding needs to be elegant and sophisticated. Vanessa's parents are very traditional, very refined people. They're paying for half of everything, and they have certain expectations. So this is about impressing Vanessa's parents? I asked, anger finally breaking through the shock. This is about giving your brother the wedding day he deserves, my father said firmly. We're not asking you to disappear forever, just for a few weeks. Take a trip. Go visit some friends out of state. Use the time to think about the kind of person you want to be. When you come back, we can work on rebuilding our relationship. But right now, the most loving thing you can do for this family is to step back. I stared at them. These two people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, who were supposed to protect me, and I realized I didn't know them at all. Or maybe I did, and I'd just been lying to myself for years about what they really thought of me. Fine, I said, my voice hollow. If that's what you want, I'll go. My mother looked relieved. Actually relieved. Thank you, sweetheart. This is really the best thing? I'm not doing it for you, I interrupted, grabbing my purse from the counter. I'm doing it because clearly I'm not wanted here. There's a difference. I walked out of that kitchen and went straight upstairs to my childhood bedroom. The walls were still painted the pale blue I'd chosen when I was 13. My old swimming trophies lined the bookshelf. Pictures of me and Derek at various ages were tucked into the frame of my mirror. I looked at one, us at the beach, maybe 10 years ago, both of us laughing, his arm around my shoulders. Had he really always thought I was too much? Had I been blind to his resentment all these years? I pulled out my laptop and started searching for flights. I had some money saved up from graduation gifts and a small inheritance from Aunt Patricia. If my family wanted me gone, I'd go somewhere they'd never think to look for me. 3 hours later, I'd booked a one-way ticket to Nashville, Tennessee. I'd never been there before, didn't know anyone there, and that felt perfect. I could start over, become someone new, someone who wasn't too much for everyone around her. I spent the next 2 days packing up my life while my parents and Derek avoided me. I'd see them in passing, my mother bringing in groceries, my father leaving for work, Derek stopping by to pick up something for the wedding. None of them asked where I was going or when I'd be back. It was like I'd already disappeared. The night before my flight, Derek knocked on my bedroom door. I was sealing the last of the boxes I'd be putting in storage. "Come in," I called, not looking up. He stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. "So you're really leaving? That's what you wanted, isn't it?" "Elena." "No, Derek, don't." I finally looked at him, and I must have looked different because he actually flinched. "Don't tell me you didn't mean it, or that Mom and Dad twisted your words. You're 30 years old. If you didn't want me at your wedding, you could have told me yourself instead of sending them to do your dirty work." "It's complicated," he said weakly. "It's really not. Either you want your sister at your wedding or you don't. Apparently you don't. Message received." He shifted his weight from foot to foot. "Where are you going? Why do you care?" "I'm still your brother." I laughed, but it was a bitter sound I didn't recognize. "Are you?" "Because brothers usually don't ask their sisters to disappear. It's just for a few weeks." "It's forever, Derek. You know that, right? Even if I come back, even if I show up at Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever, this moment will always be between us. You chose Vanessa and her parents and your perfect wedding over me." "I'm never going to forget that." He looked like he wanted to say something else, but I turned back to my packing. After a moment, I heard him leave, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. My flight left at 6 in the morning. No one got up to say goodbye. As the plane lifted off from Portland International Airport, I watched my city get smaller and smaller beneath me. I didn't cry. I felt numb, like I was watching my life from outside my body. The woman sitting next to me asked if I was traveling for business or pleasure, and I didn't know how to answer. How do you tell a stranger that you're running away from your own family? When I landed in Nashville 7 hours later, we had a layover in Denver, it was raining. I stood outside the airport with my 2 suitcases and 1 backpack, watching the water stream down around me, and I made myself a promise. I would build a new life here. I would become successful, independent, and self-sufficient. and I would never, ever let anyone make me feel like I was too much again. I had no idea that 3 years later, I'd be standing in this same airport, flying back to Portland for my father's funeral, about to discover the real reason my family wanted me gone. And it had nothing to do with being dramatic or overwhelming. It had everything to do with a secret they'd been keeping since the day I was born. Nashville became my salvation in ways I never expected. I found a tiny studio apartment in East Nashville, in a converted house with peeling paint, and a landlord who asked no questions when I paid 3 months' rent upfront in cash. The neighborhood was full of musicians, artists, and people who seemed to be running from something too. I got a job within the first week, nothing glamorous, just waiting tables at a busy brunch spot called the Mockingbird Cafe. The owner, a woman named June Holloway with silver hair and kind eyes, hired me on the spot when I told her I could start immediately. She didn't ask about my background or why a girl with a master's degree in architecture was applying to serve pancakes. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. The work was exhausting but mind-numbing in the best way. I didn't have to think about my family or Derek's wedding, or the fact that I'd been erased from what should have been a major family event. I just smiled, took orders, poured coffee, and collected tips. My co-workers became my first real friends in Nashville. There was Marcus, a bass player trying to make it in the country music scene. Riley, a transgender woman studying nursing at Vanderbilt. And Chloe, a single mom with a wicked sense of humor who could carry 5 plates at once without breaking a sweat. They adopted me into their circle without hesitation, inviting me to late-night diners after shifts, to house parties in cramped apartments, to open mic nights where Marcus would play. For the first time in my life, I felt like I could just exist without being judged for being too emotional or too dramatic. I didn't tell them much about why I'd left Portland. Just that I'd needed a fresh start, and they accepted that without pushing for details. In Nashville, everyone seemed to be reinventing themselves. 3 weeks after I arrived, Derek's wedding happened. I knew the exact date, of course, October 15th. I worked a double shift that day, volunteering to cover for Riley who had midterms. I kept myself so busy that I barely had time to think about what was happening back home. But that night, alone in my apartment, I made the mistake of looking at social media. Derek hadn't blocked me, and neither had most of my extended family. The photos were everywhere: the ceremony at the Botanical Gardens, the reception at some fancy hotel ballroom, Vanessa in a stunning lace gown. Everyone looked so happy. My parents beaming in family photos, Derek laughing with his groomsmen, Vanessa dancing with her father, and in not a single photo was there an empty space that suggested anyone was missing me. It was like I'd never existed. I deleted every social media app from my phone that night. If my family could erase me so easily, I could erase them too. Months passed. I got promoted to shift supervisor at the Mockingbird. I started taking freelance graphic design jobs on the side. Not architecture, but close enough to use my creative skills. I made enough money to move to a better apartment. A 1-bedroom in Germantown with actual heat and windows that didn't leak. I dated a musician named Tyler for a few months, but it fizzled out when he got a touring gig. I adopted a cat from a shelter, an orange tabby I named Waylon after Waylon Jennings. I started taking pottery classes on Tuesdays. I learned to make biscuits from scratch using June's secret recipe. I built a life. My family never reached out. Not once. No calls, no texts, no emails asking where I was or if I was okay. The silence was deafening, but eventually it became normal. I stopped expecting my phone to ring with my mother's number. I stopped jumping every time I saw someone who looked like Derek from behind. I convinced myself I was over it, that I'd moved on. Then 2 years and 8 months after I left Portland, I got the call that changed everything. It was a Wednesday morning in June. I was at the cafe, prepping for the breakfast rush, when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Portland area code. I almost didn't answer, but something made me step outside into the humid morning air and press accept. "Hello, Elena Clark?" A man's voice, formal and cautious. Yes, who is this? My name is Robert Morrison. I'm an attorney with Morrison and Associates in Portland. I'm calling because I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Your father, James Clark, passed away yesterday morning from a heart attack. I'm very sorry for your loss. The world tilted sideways. I grabbed the brick wall of the cafe to steady myself. What? The word came out as barely a whisper. I understand this must be a shock. Your mother asked me to contact you. The funeral is scheduled for this Saturday at Cedar Hills Memorial. The service begins at 10 a.m. My father was dead. The man who'd stood in our kitchen and told me my presence was unwanted at my own brother's wedding, gone. And I didn't know how to feel about it. Elena, are you still there? Mr. Morrison asked. Yes, I'm here. I need to process this, of course. I should also mention that your father named you in his will. You'll need to be present for the reading, which will take place Sunday morning at my office. I'm emailing you all the details now. He named me in his will? That seemed impossible. Why would he leave me anything when he'd made it clear I was an inconvenience to the family? Yes, I can't discuss the details over the phone, but I encourage you to attend. There are some matters that need to be addressed in person. After I hung up, I stood outside the Mockingbird for 20 minutes, watching cars pass on the street, trying to make sense of what I'd just heard. June eventually came outside and found me there, and I told her everything, about my family, about being asked to leave, about the 3 years of silence. Do you want to go back? She asked gently. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to tell them to handle it without me, but another part needs closure. She finished for me. That night, I booked a flight to Portland. Marcus offered to watch Waylon. Riley helped me pack. Chloe lent me a black dress for the funeral. You've got this, she said, hugging me at my apartment door. And if they're awful to you, you come right back home. This is your home now. Home. She was right. Nashville was my home. Portland was just the place I used to live. The flight back felt surreal, like traveling backward through time. When we began our descent into Portland, I could see Mount Hood in the distance, snow-capped and majestic. I'd forgotten how beautiful it was here. My mother had offered to have someone pick me up from the airport, but I'd declined and rented a car instead. I needed the independence, the ability to leave whenever I wanted. I drove to a hotel near the airport, not to my childhood home. I wasn't ready for that yet. The funeral was in 2 days. I had 48 hours to prepare myself to see my family again, to face Derek and my mother and everyone who'd been perfectly fine with my absence. That first night in the hotel, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my father, not the cold, distant man who'd asked me to disappear, but the father from my childhood. The one who taught me to swim at the community pool. The one who helped me build a volcano for the science fair in 4th grade. The one who cried when I got accepted to graduate school. When had he stopped being that person? Or had I just stopped noticing the signs that he'd never really loved me the way a father should? The next morning, Friday, I drove past my old house. I didn't stop, just slowed down as I passed. The lawn was immaculately maintained. There were new shutters on the windows. A silver BMW sat in the driveway, Derek's car. He was there, probably helping Mom with funeral arrangements. I kept driving. I spent the day walking around my old neighborhood, visiting places I used to love. The bookstore where I'd spent hours as a teenager. The coffee shop where I'd studied for finals. The park where Derek taught me to throw a baseball. Everything looked the same but felt different, like a movie set of my old life. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Elena, this is Derek. Mom gave me your number. I know tomorrow is going to be hard. I just wanted to say I'm glad you're coming back. We need to talk. I stared at the message for a long time before responding. See you tomorrow. I didn't say I was glad. I didn't say I missed him. Because I wasn't sure either of those things were true. What I was curious. Curious about what Mr. Morrison meant about matters that needed to be addressed. Curious about why my father had named me in his will after years of silence. Curious about what secret the lawyer's voice had hinted at when he'd said I needed to be there in person. Saturday morning arrived too quickly. I put on Chloe's black dress, did my makeup carefully to hide the circles under my eyes from not sleeping, and drove to Cedar Hills Memorial. The parking lot was packed. Apparently, my father had been well liked by the community, even if his own daughter was disposable. I sat in my rental car for 10 minutes, watching people stream into the building. I recognized some of them, neighbors, my parents' friends, people from my father's company. Finally, I forced myself to get out. The funeral home was one of those too perfect places, all hushed tones and soft carpet and the cloying smell of lilies. A man in a dark suit directed me toward the main chapel. I could hear the organ playing something somber, voices murmuring in conversation. And as I stepped through the doorway, I saw them. My mother, dressed in elegant black, her hair perfectly styled, accepting condolences from a line of people. She looked older than I remembered, more fragile, and Derek, standing beside her with Vanessa at his side. His face was drawn, tired. He was wearing a suit I'd never seen before. The moment Derek saw me, his expression changed to something I couldn't quite read. Surprise? Relief? Guilt? He started to move toward me, but before he could reach me, my mother turned and our eyes met across the crowded room. Her face went completely white. Then she did something that made everyone in the chapel turn to stare. She fainted. Chaos erupted in the chapel. Derek lunged forward to catch my mother before she hit the ground, while Vanessa rushed to get water. Several people from the crowd, people I vaguely recognized as my parents' friends, hurried over to help. Someone called for a doctor, and a silver-haired man pushed through the gathering crowd. I stood frozen in the doorway. Everyone's attention now split between my unconscious mother and me, the daughter who'd apparently caused her collapse just by existing. Give her space, the doctor commanded, kneeling beside my mother as Derek carefully lowered her onto a velvet bench against the wall. Her eyelids fluttered and she began to come around, confusion clouding her features before her gaze found me again. This time she didn't faint, but the look on her face was something I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger or disappointment or even the cold distance I'd grown accustomed to. It was fear. Pure, undiluted terror. "No," she whispered, gripping Derek's arm so tightly her knuckles went white. "No, she can't be here." "She can't." "Mom, it's okay," Derek said, his voice strained. "It's just Elena. She came for Dad's funeral." "You don't understand," my mother said, her voice rising to a pitch that made people shift uncomfortably. "She needs to leave, now, before—" "Mrs. Clark, you've had a shock," the doctor interrupted, pressing his fingers to her wrist to check her pulse. "Let's get you somewhere quiet. You shouldn't be making decisions right now." A woman I recognized as Mrs. Patterson, our former neighbor, appeared at my elbow. "Elena, dear, perhaps you should wait in one of the family rooms until your mother is feeling better. This has all been very stressful for her." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity. I'd been gone for nearly 3 years without a single phone call, and now my presence was causing my mother to have a medical emergency? "Maybe I should just go," I said quietly. "No." The word came from Derek, firm and loud enough that several people turned to look. He gently extracted himself from our mother's grip and walked toward me. Up close, I could see he'd aged in the past 3 years. There were lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before, and something in his expression that looked like exhaustion mixed with resignation. "Elena, please don't leave. We need to talk after the service. There are things you need to know." "Derek, no," my mother called out, trying to stand but swaying dangerously. The doctor and Vanessa both reached out to steady her. "You can't tell her." We agreed. "Dad's dead, Mom," Derek said, and his voice cracked on the words. "The agreement doesn't matter anymore." "An agreement? About what?" Before I could ask, a funeral director in an impeccably tailored suit appeared, clearly eager to get things back on track. "Ladies and gentlemen, if we could all please take our seats. The service will begin in 5 minutes." The crowd began to disperse, people murmuring amongst themselves and shooting curious glances my way. I caught fragments of their whispers. "Thought she was overseas. Haven't seen her in years. Wonder what happened." And felt my face burn. Derek touched my arm gently. Will you stay, please? Sit in the back if you want, but don't go. After this is over, I'll explain everything. I looked past him to where my mother was being helped into the front row by Vanessa and Mrs. Patterson. She kept glancing back at me, like I was a ghost that might attack at any moment. Fine, I said. But I want answers, Derek, real ones. You'll get them. I promise. I took a seat in the very last row, next to an elderly couple I didn't recognize. The chapel filled up quickly. My father had apparently touched many lives in Portland. The organ music swelled, and the funeral director began the service with the standard platitudes about celebrating a life well lived and finding comfort in memories. A parade of people went to the podium to share stories about James Clark. His business partner talked about his integrity and work ethic. A man from his golf club shared a funny anecdote about a tournament. A woman from his church praised his generosity and faith. I listened to them describe a man I barely recognized. Kind, thoughtful, beloved by his community. Where was the father who told his daughter she was too much trouble to have at her brother's wedding? Then Derek stood to give the family eulogy. He walked to the podium slowly, his hands trembling slightly as he unfolded a piece of paper. But when he looked up, he wasn't reading from it. His eyes found mine in the back row. My father was a complicated man, Derek began, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. He loved his family fiercely, but he also carried burdens that he thought he had to bear alone. He made choices, some good, some he regretted, because he believed he was protecting the people he loved. He paused, swallowing hard. Dad used to tell me that the hardest part of being a parent isn't the big decisions. It's living with the consequences of those decisions, especially when they hurt the people you're trying to protect. I didn't understand what he meant until recently. My mother shifted in her seat, her shoulders rigid. James Clark wasn't perfect, Derek continued. But in his final weeks, he wanted to make things right. He wanted the truth to come out, even though it scared him. Even though it might change everything we thought we knew about our family. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. He wanted to give back what was taken. What was taken? My mind raced, trying to make sense of Derek's words. The service continued with a final hymn and a prayer, and then people began filing out toward the cemetery for the burial. I stayed in my seat, unsure whether I should follow. The elderly couple next to me offered their condolences. Apparently they'd figured out who I was, and shuffled away. Derek appeared at the end of my row. Will you come to the burial? It's just family and close friends. Am I considered family? The bitterness in my voice surprised even me. He flinched. Elena, I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But please just get through today with us. Tomorrow morning, we meet with Mr. Morrison for the reading. That's when you'll understand everything. Why can't you just tell me now? Because it's not just my story to tell. He glanced toward the front where our mother was being escorted out by Vanessa. And because once you know, everything changes. Give yourself one more day of not knowing. Trust me on that. The cemetery was less than a mile away. I drove separately, following the procession of cars with their headlights on. The June sun beat down mercilessly, making the black clothing feel oppressive. We gathered around the grave site, a plot next to my grandparents'. I noticed and listened to the priests say final words about dust and ashes and eternal rest. I watched them lower my father's casket into the ground and tried to conjure some feeling besides numbness and confusion. This man had helped create me, raise me, and then asked me to disappear from his life. And now he was gone, taking whatever explanation he might have given with him. Except, apparently, he'd left something behind, instructions, a will, answers. After the burial, people gathered at the house for a reception. I almost didn't go, but Derek caught up with me in the parking lot. Please, he said simply, just for an hour. People will want to see you. The same people who didn't notice I was gone for 3 years? Elena, fine, 1 hour. Then I'm going back to my hotel. The house looked exactly the same on the outside, but felt completely foreign as I stepped through the front door. The same furniture, the same photos on the walls, though I noticed all the ones featuring me had been moved to less prominent locations. The same smell of my mother's lavender potpourri. People filled the living room and dining room, balancing plates of catered food and speaking in hushed tones. Several of them did double takes when they saw me, and I heard my name ripple through the crowd in whispers. Mrs. Gallagher, who'd lived next door for 20 years, approached me with tears in her eyes. "Elena, oh my goodness, we'd heard you were living abroad. It's so wonderful that you made it back for this." Abroad? Is that what they'd been told? "Just temporarily relocated," I said vaguely. "Well, your father would have been so happy you're here. He talked about you often." That seemed unlikely, but I just nodded and accepted her hug. More people approached, some I knew, some I didn't, offering condolences and variations of the same surprise that I was there. Several mentioned hearing I was in Europe. One thought I'd been in Asia. Another had been told I was doing humanitarian work in South America. My family had created an entire fictional life for me, rather than admit they'd asked me to leave. Found Vanessa in the kitchen, arranging cookies on a platter. She looked up when I entered and immediately set down what she was holding. "Elena, I wasn't sure you'd come. Derek asked me to." She nodded slowly, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "I owe you an apology. For the wedding. I knew what they'd asked you to do, and I should have spoken up. I should have insisted you be there. Did you want me there?" I asked bluntly. She met my eyes, and I saw genuine regret in them. "Yes, I did. Derek's my husband, which makes you my sister-in-law. But I was young and scared of making waves with my new family. That's not an excuse, just the truth." Before I could respond, my mother appeared in the doorway. She'd regained her composure since the chapel, though her face was still pale. "Vanessa, Mrs. Patterson needs help finding the cream for her coffee." It was clearly a dismissal. Vanessa glanced between us, squeezed my hand briefly, and left. My mother and I stood in the kitchen where, 3 years ago, she'd told me I was unwanted. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "Why did you come back?" she finally asked. "Because my father died. And because his lawyer said I needed to be here." "Robert Morrison." She said the name like a curse. "Your father insisted on using him even though I told him it was a mistake." "Why?" "What's in the will that has everyone so terrified?" My mother's composure cracked, just for a moment, and I saw that same fear from the chapel flash across her face. "Tomorrow you'll learn things about this family that you can never unlearn. Things that will change how you see all of us. Part of me wishes you'd stayed in Nashville, living your life, never knowing." My breath caught. "How did you know I was in Nashville?" "I never told anyone where I went." A sad smile crossed her face. "You're still my daughter, Elena. Did you really think I wouldn't keep track of you?" She'd known where I was this entire time. She'd known, and she'd never reached out. Never called. Never visited. Then why? "Because keeping you away was the kindest thing we could do." She moved closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "And tomorrow, when you sit in that lawyer's office and hear what your father wanted to tell you, you might wish we'd kept it that way. Some secrets are better left buried." She walked out, leaving me alone in the kitchen with more questions than ever. What secret could possibly justify 3 years of silence? I was about to find out. I left the reception early, claiming exhaustion from travel. Nobody tried to stop me. Back at the hotel, I ordered room service and tried to make sense of everything that had happened. My mother's cryptic warning. Derek's eulogy about giving back what was taken. The elaborate lies about me living abroad. Something was very wrong with my family, and it had been wrong long before they asked me to leave. I called Marcus in Nashville, needing to hear a friendly voice. "How'd it go?" he asked, and I could hear music in the background, probably the bar where he played on Saturday nights. Weird. Really weird. My mom fainted when she saw me, and everyone keeps hinting at some big secret that I'll find out tomorrow. That's dramatic, even for a funeral. "You okay?" "Honestly, I don't know. Part of me wants to get on the next flight home and forget all of this. But another part needs to know what they've been hiding. Then stay and find out. You didn't come all this way to run away again." He was right. I'd spent 3 years building a new life, becoming stronger and more independent. I could handle whatever my family had to tell me. That night, I barely slept. I kept replaying moments from my childhood, looking for clues I might have missed. Had there always been signs that something was off? My father's occasional distant stares, my mother's overprotectiveness when I was young, which had turned to coldness as I got older. The way extended family members sometimes looked at me with a mixture of pity and discomfort. Sunday morning arrived with gray skies threatening rain. I dressed carefully in slacks and a blouse, professional armor for whatever was coming. Mr. Morrison's office was in downtown Portland, in one of those old buildings with character that new construction could never replicate. The receptionist directed me to a conference room on the third floor. Derek was already there, sitting at a long mahogany table, staring into a cup of coffee. He looked like he hadn't slept either. "Morning?" I said, taking a seat across from him. "You came? Did you think I wouldn't? Honestly, part of me hoped you'd get on a plane and go back to Nashville. This would be easier if you never knew." "Easier for who?" Before he could answer, my mother arrived with Vanessa. Mom's eyes were red-rimmed, like she'd been crying all night. She took a seat at the head of the table without looking at me. Mr. Morrison entered last, carrying a leather briefcase and wearing an expression of professional neutrality. He was probably in his 60s, with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that suggested he'd seen every kind of family drama imaginable. "Thank you all for coming," he said, settling into his chair and pulling out several folders. "I'll get straight to the point since I know this is a difficult time. James Clark came to see me 6 weeks ago to update his will. He was very specific about certain provisions and insisted that this meeting take place with all of you present. 6 weeks ago. My father had known he was going to do this before he died." Mr. Morrison opened the first folder. "The standard provisions are straightforward. Linda, you inherit the house and half of James's financial assets, including his retirement accounts and investment portfolio. Derek, you inherit the other half of the financial assets and a 25% stake in your father's company." My mother nodded stiffly. Derek didn't react at all. "Elena," Mr. Morrison turned to me, "you inherit your father's collection of first edition books. He wanted you to know he remembered how much you loved reading them as a child, and a trust fund that was set up in your name when you were born. It's worth approximately $400,000. I stared at him. $400,000? Where had that come from? However, Mr. Morrison continued, his tone shifting slightly, there are additional provisions that James insisted be addressed in this meeting. He left specific instructions, including a letter to be read aloud by me. He pulled out an envelope, broke the seal, and unfolded a handwritten letter. My father's handwriting. I recognized it immediately. Mr. Morrison cleared his throat and began to read. "If you're hearing this, then I'm gone, and it's time for the truth to come out. Elena, Derek, Linda, I'm sorry for the pain this will cause, but living with this secret has poisoned our family for 24 years. I can't die without making it right." My heart started pounding. 24 years. That was my entire life. "Elena, there's no easy way to say this, so I'll be direct. You are not my biological daughter. You were adopted through a private arrangement when you were 3 days old. Linda and I were told your birth mother was a young woman who couldn't keep you, that everything was legal and above board. We raised you as our own, and I want you to know that I loved you as my daughter, even when I failed to show it." The room tilted. The words didn't make sense. Adopted? How could I be adopted? I looked like my mother. Everyone had always said so. I laughed at my father. "Derek and I had the same eyes. The problem started when you were 5 years old. A woman named Sarah Brennan contacted us, claiming to be your biological mother. She said she'd been coerced into giving you up, that the adoption wasn't consensual, that she'd been drugged and her signature forged on the paperwork. She threatened to go to the police and the media unless we paid her to stay quiet." My mother made a strangled sound. Vanessa reached over and took her hand. We panicked. "We'd had you for 5 years. You were our daughter in every way that mattered. So we paid her $50,000 to go away. It seemed like the end of it. But Sarah came back when you were 10, demanding more money. And again when you were 15. And again when you turned 21. Over the years, we paid her close to $300,000 in total. $300,000. My entire childhood shadowed by blackmail. The money came from savings, from loans, from anywhere we could find it without raising suspicions. We lived in constant fear that Sarah would make good on her threats, or that you'd somehow find out. Every time you asked questions about baby pictures or family medical history, Linda and I had to lie. The weight of those lies changed us, changed how we treated you. Derek was staring at the table, his jaw clenched. My mother had her eyes closed, tears streaming down her face. By the time you were in your 20s, the stress had become unbearable. When Derek announced his engagement, Sarah contacted us again. She'd discovered through social media that you were back in Portland, and she threatened to show up at the wedding and reveal everything publicly unless we paid her $100,000. We didn't have that kind of money anymore. We were drowning in debt from her previous demands. Oh, God. The wedding. They hadn't asked me to leave because I was too much. They'd asked me to leave to protect their secret? That's when I suggested you take a trip, that you would miss the wedding. I told myself it was temporary, that once Sarah saw you were gone, she'd back off. And it worked. She disappeared again. But then months turned to years, and I didn't know how to bring you back without explaining why we'd asked you to leave in the first place. I was a coward, Elena. I chose the lie over you, and I'll regret that for whatever time I have left. Mr. Morrison paused, looking at me with something like sympathy before continuing. 6 months ago, I was diagnosed with heart disease. The doctors gave me a year at best. I knew I was running out of time to make this right. So I hired a private investigator to find Sarah Brennan and get answers. What he discovered changes everything. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Sarah Brennan is not your biological mother. She never was. The real story is this. In 2001, a nurse named Sarah Brennan worked at Providence Hospital in Portland. She had access to birth records and newborn information. She ran an illegal adoption ring, taking babies from young mothers who were unconscious or impaired after delivery, and falsifying records to show the babies had died or been stillborn. She sold these babies to desperate couples for large sums of money. My mother gasped. Derek's head snapped up. Linda and I didn't know this when we adopted you. We thought we were giving a home to a child whose mother couldn't care for her. But Sarah had stolen you from your real mother and sold you to us for $75,000. Then years later, she came back to extort more money, knowing we'd pay anything to keep you. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Stolen. I'd been stolen from my real mother. The investigator found 15 other cases of babies Sarah Brennan placed through illegal adoptions. Most of those families had no idea their children were stolen. 8 of those babies have since been reunited with their biological families. 7, including you, have not been. Mr. Morrison's voice softened as he read the final paragraph. Elena, your biological mother's name is Margaret Whitmore. She lives in Beaverton, Oregon, less than 10 miles from where you grew up. She was 17 when you were born, alone in the hospital, drugged heavily during delivery. When she woke up, they told her you'd died during childbirth. She never knew you survived. The investigator made contact with her 3 weeks ago. She's been searching for you for 24 years. And she wants to meet you, if you're willing. The letter ended. Mr. Morrison folded it carefully and set it down on the table. There's more, he said quietly. James's investigator compiled a full report, including DNA evidence that confirms Margaret Whitmore is your biological mother. He also gathered evidence of Sarah Brennan's crimes and submitted it to the FBI. She was arrested 2 weeks before James passed away. She's currently awaiting trial. Nobody spoke. The silence was crushing. I'd been stolen. Sold. My entire existence was built on a crime. The woman I called Mom wasn't my mother. The man I'd just buried wasn't my father. And somewhere in Beaverton, a woman who thought I was dead had been grieving me for 24 years. Elena? Derek's voice seemed to come from very far away. Please say something. I stood up, my legs shaking. I need air. I walked out of the conference room, down the hallway, into the elevator, and out onto the street. The gray sky had opened up, rain pouring down, but I barely felt it. I walked for blocks without direction, my mind a chaos of thoughts and emotions I couldn't untangle. I'd spent 3 years angry at my family for rejecting me. But they hadn't rejected me. They'd been trapped in an impossible situation, trying to protect a secret that had poisoned everything. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek. "I know this is overwhelming. Take all the time you need. But when you're ready, Margaret wants to meet you. She's been waiting her whole life for this moment. I have her number. Margaret Whitmore." My real mother. I stood in the rain watching cars pass and realized my life had just split into 2 distinct parts. Before this moment, and everything that would come after. And I had no idea who Elena Clark really was anymore. I walked in the rain for over an hour before finding myself at a small park I didn't recognize. I sat on a bench under a tree that provided minimal shelter and watched puddles form on the pavement. My phone kept buzzing with messages, Derek, Vanessa, even my mother. But I couldn't bring myself to read them. Everything I thought I knew about myself was a lie. My medical history, my ancestry, my genetic predispositions, all of it belonged to someone else. Margaret Whitmore, a woman I'd never met who'd spent 24 years grieving a daughter who wasn't actually dead. The cruelty of it was staggering. While I'd grown up with birthday parties and Christmas mornings and trips to the beach, she'd been living with the devastation of losing a child. While I'd learned to ride a bike and graduated high school and earned my master's degree, she'd been carrying an impossible grief. And my parents, no, Linda and James, they'd known. For 19 years, they'd known I was stolen, and they'd chosen to keep paying the blackmailer rather than face the truth. My phone rang. Derek's name flashed on the screen. I almost declined, but something made me answer. "Where are you?" he asked immediately. "Mom's losing it. She thinks you've left town. I'm at a park. I don't know which one. Elena, please come back to the office. We need to talk about this as a family." I laughed, and it sounded unhinged even to my own ears. "Family? Derek, I'm not part of your family." "Apparently I never was." "That's not true." "You're my sister. That hasn't changed. Except we don't share DNA. We're not actually related. I'm just some random kid your parents bought from a criminal." "Stop it." His voice was sharp. "You're my sister because we grew up together, because I taught you to swim and helped you with your homework, and walked you to your first day of kindergarten. Biology doesn't erase that." I wanted to believe him, but everything felt too raw, too broken. "Did you know?" I asked. "Before today, did you know I was adopted?" He was quiet for so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, I suspected. When I was 16, I overheard Mom and Dad fighting about money. Dad mentioned Sarah's name and said something about keeping Elena safe. I asked him about it later, and he told me it was complicated, that there were things about our family I didn't understand yet. He made me promise not to say anything to you. You kept their secret for 8 years. I know. I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting you. Everyone keeps saying that. But it seems like you were all just protecting yourselves. I hung up before he could respond. It wasn't fair. Derek had been a teenager when he'd learned whatever fragments he'd known, but I wasn't feeling particularly fair. The rain finally stopped. I walked back to my rental car, which I'd apparently abandoned blocks away from Mr. Morrison's office. By the time I got back to the hotel, it was late afternoon. I was soaked, exhausted, and completely numb. There was a voicemail from Mr. Morrison. I listened to it while sitting on the edge of the hotel bed. "Elena, I understand you need time to process everything. However, I should inform you that Margaret Whitmore has been in contact with my office. She's asked if you'd be willing to meet with her. There's no pressure. You can take as long as you need to decide. But I wanted you to know that she's available whenever you're ready. She's given me her number to pass along to you. Call me when you want to talk." I saved his message and sat there staring at the hotel room wall. Somewhere in Beaverton, less than 10 miles away, Margaret Whitmore was waiting to hear if the daughter she'd mourned for 2 decades wanted to meet her. What do you even say to someone in that situation? "Hi, sorry I wasn't actually dead?" My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize with a Portland area code. Hello? Elena, this is Vanessa. I'm calling from my cell. Derek gave me your number. Please don't hang up. What do you want, Vanessa? I want to talk to you without Derek or your mom around. Can I come to your hotel, please? Just give me 20 minutes. I should have said no. But there was something in her voice, not pity, not guilt, but genuine concern that made me give her the hotel name and room number. She arrived 30 minutes later, carrying 2 coffees from a nearby cafe and looking nervous. I let her in, and we sat in the small seating area by the window. I can't imagine what you're feeling right now, she said, handing me one of the coffees. I'm not going to pretend I can, but I wanted you to know that Derek has been carrying this weight for years. After we got engaged, he told me everything he knew. He wanted me to understand why his family was so complicated. So you knew too. Great. I knew there was a secret involving your adoption. I didn't know the details until today. Derek didn't either. But Elena, you need to understand something. Derek has been advocating for you this entire time. When your parents suggested you leave for the wedding, Derek fought them. He told them it was wrong, that they needed to figure out another solution. He didn't fight hard enough. I still left, you're right, and he knows that. He's been carrying that guilt for 3 years. But he also convinced your father to finally deal with Sarah Brennan properly. Derek's the one who pushed James to hire the investigator. He's the reason the truth came out at all. I processed this information slowly. Why didn't he just tell me himself? Because it wasn't his truth to tell. These were your parents' decisions, your father's crimes to confess. Derek felt like if he told you, he'd be betraying James and causing irreparable damage to your relationship with your mother. He thought if he could get your father to come clean, it would be better coming from him. Well, Dad's dead now, so I guess that plan worked out great. Vanessa didn't flinch at my sarcasm. Your father was a coward in many ways, but in the end he tried to make it right. That letter, the investigation, making sure you'd inherit enough money to be independent, those were his attempts at redemption. $400,000 and a collection of books. That's what my real identity is worth, apparently. No, Elena. That's what his guilt is worth. Your real identity is worth everything. And Margaret Whitmore knows that. The mention of my biological mother made my chest tighten. Have you met her? No, but Mr. Morrison shared some information about her. She's a high school art teacher. She never married, never had other children. She's been part of support groups for parents who've lost children. She started a foundation that helps pregnant teenagers get support and resources. She turned her grief into something that helps others. An art teacher. I'd always loved art, had minored in it during undergrad before switching to architecture. Was that genetic? Or just coincidence? Derek thinks I should meet her, I said quietly. I think you should do whatever feels right to you. If you need more time, take it. If you need to go back to Nashville and process all of this from a distance, do that. But if you're even a little curious about Margaret, about who she is and where you came from, then maybe consider it. She's been waiting 24 years. But she'll wait longer if you need her to. After Vanessa left, I ordered room service and opened my laptop. I typed Margaret Whitmore, Beaverton, Oregon into the search engine. She had a Facebook page. The profile picture showed a woman in her early 40s with dark hair streaked with gray, wearing glasses and a warm smile. She was holding a paintbrush, standing in front of a canvas. I scrolled through her public posts. Pictures of student artwork with encouraging captions. Articles about adoption reform and birth parent rights. A post from last year about the anniversary of losing my daughter. My birthday. 24 years ago today, I held my baby girl for 30 seconds before they took her away. 24 years ago, they told me she was gone. I think about her every single day. I wonder what she would have looked like, who she would have become. I hope wherever she is, she's at peace. I closed the laptop before I started crying. That night, I called Marcus again. How'd the lawyer thing go? He asked. I told him everything. The whole impossible story spilled out. The adoption, the blackmail, Sarah Brennan's crimes, Margaret Whitmore. He listened without interrupting, and when I finally finished, he was quiet for a long moment. So, what are you going to do? He asked gently. I don't know. Part of me wants to get on a plane and pretend none of this happened. Go back to Nashville. Back to my life. Back to being Elna Clark who serves pancakes and takes pottery classes. But I can't stop thinking about her. About Margaret. About what it must have been like to lose a child, and then find out 24 years later that she's alive. How do I walk away from that? You don't, Marcus said simply. You're not the kind of person who walks away from hard things, Elena. You face them. It's one of the things I admire most about you. I'm terrified. Of course you are, but you're also brave. Meet her, hear her story. You don't have to become her daughter overnight. You don't have to choose between her and the family that raised you. You just have to show up and be honest. After we hung up, I pulled out the piece of paper Mr. Morrison had given me with Margaret's phone number. I stared at it for 20 minutes before I finally worked up the courage to send a text. Hi, this is Elena Clark. I got your number from Mr. Morrison. I'd like to meet you if you're still willing. The response came within 60 seconds. Elena. Oh, my God. Yes. Whenever you're ready. I'm ready. I've been ready for 24 years. Thank you for reaching out. Thank you for being alive. I read that last sentence over and over. Thank you for being alive. We arranged to meet the next day at a neutral location, a quiet cafe in a part of Portland neither of us frequented. She asked if I wanted to bring someone with me for support, and I almost said yes. But this felt like something I needed to do alone. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining what Margaret would be like in person. Would we look alike? Would there be an instant connection, or would it be awkward and strained? Would she have expectations I couldn't meet? The next morning, I changed outfits 3 times before settling on jeans and a simple blouse. I arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early and ordered a tea I didn't drink, just to have something to do with my hands. At exactly 11 o'clock, the cafe door opened, and a woman walked in. Margaret Whitmore. Our eyes met across the room, and I watched her face transform. She pressed a hand to her mouth, tears immediately streaming down her face. She took a tentative step forward, then another, like she was afraid I might disappear if she moved too fast. I stood up, my heart hammering in my chest. Elena? She whispered when she was close enough. Is it really you? And somehow, looking at this stranger who was also my mother, I knew exactly what to say. It's really me. I'm here. She reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away if I wanted to. But I didn't. I let her take my hand. And the moment our skin touched, she broke down completely, sobbing in the middle of the cafe while other patrons looked on with curiosity and concern. I thought you were dead, she said through her tears. They told me you were dead. For 24 years, I thought I'd never see you again. I know, I said, my own tears finally starting to fall. I'm so sorry. For all of it. Don't apologize. You didn't do anything wrong. You were stolen from me, and now you're here and you're real. And you're alive. We sat down, neither of us letting go of the other's hand, and began the impossible conversation of piecing together a life that should have been. We sat in that cafe for 4 hours. Margaret told me her story, and I told her mine. And slowly, we began to map out the parallel lives we'd lived just miles apart from each other. She'd been 17 when she got pregnant. The father was her high school boyfriend who'd panicked and disappeared the moment she told him. Her own parents had kicked her out, calling her a disgrace. She'd been alone, terrified, and living in a shelter for pregnant teens when she went into labor. The contractions started at 2 a.m, Margaret said, her voice distant with memory. By the time I got to the hospital, I was already dilated. Everything happened so fast. They gave me something for the pain. Too much, I think, now. I remember holding you for just a moment. You were so tiny, so perfect. You had this little birthmark on your left shoulder blade, shaped like a crescent moon. My hand automatically went to my shoulder. I'd always had that birthmark. I'd just never known it connected me to this moment. Then a nurse took you away. She said they needed to check your vitals, that I'd get you back soon. But I passed out from the medication. When I woke up 6 hours later, a different nurse was there. She told me there had been complications. That you didn't make it. They said your heart just stopped, that sometimes it happens with newborns, that there was nothing anyone could have done. Her voice broke. I asked to see you, to hold you one more time, but they said it would be too traumatic, that I should remember you as you were when you were alive. They gave me paperwork to sign for cremation. I was so drugged, so devastated, I just signed whatever they put in front of me. Sarah Brennan, I said quietly. The nurse who took me. She was the one who told you I died? I didn't remember her name until the FBI contacted me last month. But yes, she was the one who delivered the news. She was so kind, so sympathetic. I never suspected. Margaret wiped her eyes. 24 years I mourned you? I had a memorial service with just me and the chaplain from the shelter. I got a tattoo of angel wings on my wrist. I named you Hope, because even though you were gone, you'd given me hope that I could be someone better. Hope. I'd had another name. Another entire identity that had been stolen along with my life. What did you do after? I asked. After you thought I died? I fell apart for a while. Dropped out of school, drifted between jobs. But eventually I got my GED and put myself through community college. I became a teacher because I wanted to help kids who felt as lost as I had been. I never married. I dated, but nothing serious. I kept thinking that if I moved on, if I built a family with someone else, it would be like replacing you. Like saying you didn't matter. She reached across the table and took my hand again. But you did matter. You were all that mattered. I've thought about you every single day. Wondered what you would have looked like at 5, at 10, at 16. What your voice would have sounded like. Whether you would have liked art like me or been into sports or music. And now you're here, and you're 24, and you're real. I like art, I said softly. I minored in it in college. I almost became an art teacher too, actually, before I switched to architecture. Her eyes widened. Really? Really? And I hate sports but love music. I took piano lessons for 10 years. I paint sometimes, just for fun. Watercolors mostly. I teach watercolor, she whispered. It's my favorite medium. We stared at each other, both of us recognizing pieces of ourselves in the other. Genetics, I thought. These weren't coincidences. This was nature asserting itself despite being separated by lies and distance. Tell me about your life, Margaret said. Growing up, school, everything. I want to know all of it. So I told her. The good parts. My childhood love of reading, swimming competitively in high school, getting into grad school. But I also told her the hard parts. How I'd always felt like I didn't quite fit in my family. How my emotions were always too much, my personality too loud. How they'd asked me to leave for Derek's wedding. They made you leave your own brother's wedding? Margaret's expression shifted from sadness to anger. Because of what? Their guilt? Their fear? They were being blackmailed. Sarah Brennan was threatening to expose everything at the wedding. They thought if I wasn't there, she'd back off. So instead of going to the police, instead of telling you the truth, they just pushed you out of your own family. Margaret shook her head. I'm sorry, Elena. I know they raised you, and I know this is complicated, but that was wrong. You deserved better. They were scared. They thought they were protecting me. They were protecting themselves, Margaret said firmly, from the consequences of a choice they made. I understand being scared. God knows I've been terrified my entire adult life. But you don't protect people by lying to them. You don't protect people by making them feel like they're the problem. Her words hit something deep inside me. For 3 years, I'd blamed myself. I thought maybe I really was too dramatic, too emotional, too much. But maybe the problem had never been me at all. What happens now? I asked. With us, I mean. How do we do this? Margaret smiled, though her eyes were still wet with tears. However you want to. I'm not going to pressure you for anything. If you want to meet once a week for coffee, we'll do that. If you want to call me once a month, that's fine too. If you need space to process all of this, I understand. I just want to be part of your life in whatever way you're comfortable with. What do I call you? She considered this. What feels right to you? I'm not going to ask you to call me Mom. That feels like it would be disrespecting the woman who raised you, even if things are complicated between you. Margaret is fine. Or Maggie if you want. That's what my friends call me. Maggie, I repeated, testing it out. It felt less formal than Margaret, but not as loaded as Mom. I like that. We exchanged phone numbers, email addresses, and social media information. Margaret showed me photos from her life. Her classroom, her small house in Beaverton, her garden where she grew vegetables and herbs. She showed me pictures of her support group, the foundation she'd started. There are 8 of us, she explained, showing me a photo of women of various ages standing together. Women whose babies were stolen by Sarah Brennan and her accomplices. We've been meeting for years, supporting each other through the grief. When the FBI contacted me about you, about the investigation, I immediately called them. Some of their children have been found. Others are still missing. Do you think they'll all be found? I hope so. Every mother deserves to know what happened to her child. Every child deserves to know where they came from. She paused. The FBI is building a case against everyone involved in the adoption ring, not just Sarah. There were doctors, lawyers, even a social worker who helped cover it up. Your parents, the Clarks, they're not being charged with anything since they claim they didn't know. But they'll probably be called to testify. The thought of Linda and James being questioned by the FBI would have seemed impossible a week ago. Now, it was just another surreal detail in an increasingly surreal situation. Have you talked to them since the reading? Margaret asked carefully. The Clarks? Derek and Vanessa have been texting. Linda, my mom, I mean the woman who raised me, she's tried calling, but I haven't answered. I don't know what to say to her yet. That's understandable. This is a lot to process. Margaret hesitated, then said, I don't want to come between you and them, Elena. Despite everything, they raised you for 24 years. That has to mean something. I'm angry at them, yes. But I also recognize that this situation is complicated. You don't have to choose between us. It feels like I do, though. Every moment I spend with you feels like a betrayal to them. But every moment I think about going back to them, I feel angry all over again about the lies. Then don't choose right now. Take your time. Figure out what you need. She squeezed my hand. I've waited 24 years to meet you. I can wait a little longer while you figure out where I fit in your life. We finally left the cafe when they started setting up for dinner service. Margaret walked me to my car and we stood in the parking lot for a long moment, neither of us wanting to say goodbye. Can I hug you? She asked tentatively. Is that okay? I nodded, and she wrapped her arms around me, carefully at first, then tighter when I didn't pull away. She smelled like lavender and paint thinner, and something about the embrace felt both foreign and familiar. Thank you for meeting me, she whispered into my hair. Thank you for giving me a chance. Thank you for not giving up, I said back. Thank you for looking for me all these years. When we finally separated, she was crying again, but this time she was also smiling. Text me when you get back to your hotel, she said. So I know you're safe. I've spent 24 years not being able to worry about you. I'd like to start now, if that's okay. I laughed despite my own tears. Okay, I will. I drove back to the hotel in a daze. My phone had 17 missed calls and twice as many texts, mostly from Derek and Vanessa, a few from numbers I didn't recognize, and 3 from Linda. I ignored them all and texted Maggie instead. Back at the hotel. Thank you for today. Can we meet again before I go back to Nashville? Her response was immediate. Anytime. Just say when. I'm not going anywhere. That night, I finally listened to Linda's voicemails. Her voice was small, broken, nothing like the composed woman I'd grown up with. Elena, please call me back. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But please just give me a chance to explain, to apologize. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to know that I do love you. I always have. Please, honey. Please call me. The third message was shorter. I met her, didn't you? Margaret, Derek told me you were meeting her today. I'm not angry. I don't have the right to be angry. I hope she was kind to you. I hope you got some of the answers you needed. And I hope that someday you'll let me try to make this right. I saved the messages but didn't call back. I wasn't ready for that conversation yet. Instead, I called June in Nashville and told her I needed to extend my stay in Portland for at least another week. Take as long as you need, she said. Your shifts are covered. Marcus has been keeping everyone updated. We're all rooting for you, hun. I had decisions to make about my relationship with Maggie, about whether to forgive Linda and Derek, about where I belonged, Nashville, Portland, or somewhere else entirely. But tonight, I just needed to sleep. Tomorrow I'd start figuring out who Elena Clark, or Elena Whitmore, or whoever I was supposed to be, really was. I spent the next week in Portland, meeting with Maggie almost every day. We went to art museums, took walks along the waterfront, and spent hours in her classroom after school while she graded papers and I sketched. Each conversation revealed new connections between us. We both loved thunderstorms, hated mushrooms, and had an irrational fear of escalators. But we also discovered our differences. She was a morning person. I functioned better at night. She was organized and methodical. I was spontaneous and chaotic. She preferred solitude. I thrived around people. 24 years of different environments had shaped us in distinct ways, even if genetics gave us a foundation. On the fourth day, Maggie invited me to her house for dinner. It was a modest 2-bedroom bungalow with a garden exploding with color. Inside, every wall was covered with art, some hers, some from students, some pieces she'd collected over the years. I always imagined what kind of home I'd have if you'd lived, she said. Showing me around, I pictured a house full of your drawings on the fridge, your toys everywhere, photos of us together. Instead, I filled it with other people's art, other people's children's work. It helped somehow. She'd kept a room for me. Not a shrine exactly, but a space that had been waiting. A bed with a simple quilt, a bookshelf with children's books she'd collected, a dresser with the drawer pulls painted to look like flowers. I know you're an adult now, she said quietly, standing in the doorway, and I know you have your own life in Nashville. But if you ever want to visit to stay for a weekend or a week, this room is yours. It always will be. I couldn't speak past the lump in my throat, so I just hugged her. That night, over homemade lasagna that we cooked together, I asked her something that had been bothering me. Do you blame them, Linda and James, for keeping me? Maggie set down her fork and thought for a long moment. I'm trying not to. The FBI says they genuinely didn't know I'd been told you were dead, that Sarah Brennan had given them a story about a teenage mother who couldn't keep you. If that's true, then they were victims too, in a way, but... She paused. Once they found out, once Sarah started blackmailing them and they realized something was very wrong with your adoption, they should have come forward. They should have done the right thing, even if it meant losing you. They were scared of losing me, I said softly. I know, and I understand that fear. God, do I understand it? But love isn't about holding on at any cost. It's about doing what's best for the person you love, even when it's hard, even when it breaks your heart. She met my eyes. I've spent 24 years loving a ghost. If I'd known you were alive and happy with another family, it would have killed me. But I would have let you go if it meant you were safe and loved. That's what real love looks like. Her words stayed with me. That's what real love looks like. The next morning, I finally called Linda. She answered on the first ring. Elena? Oh, thank God. I've been so worried. I need to see you, I interrupted. We need to talk. Really talk. No more secrets, no more half-truths. Everything. Yes, of course. When? Today? This afternoon? Just you and me. We met at the house, my childhood home that no longer felt like home. Linda looked like she'd aged 10 years in a week. Her hair needed touching up, her clothes were rumpled, and her eyes were red and swollen. We sat in the living room where I'd spent countless evenings doing homework, watching TV, being a normal kid who didn't know her entire existence was built on lies. I don't know where to start, Linda said, twisting a tissue in her hands. Start with the truth. All of it. Why did you and Dad want a baby so badly that you'd pay $75,000 for an illegal adoption? She took a shaky breath. I couldn't have children. We'd been trying for 5 years, went through 3 rounds of IVF, had 2 miscarriages. The doctors said it was unlikely I'd ever carry to term. We looked into legal adoption, but the waiting lists were years long, and the process was invasive and expensive. We were desperate, heartbroken. So when Sarah Brennan offered you a baby, you didn't ask questions? We asked some questions, Linda said defensively. She showed us paperwork. She had documents that looked official. She told us about a 17-year-old mother who wanted to give her baby a good home, but couldn't keep it herself. Everything seemed legitimate. We thought we were giving a child in need a loving family. Until Sarah came back when I was 5. Linda's face crumpled. Until then. She showed up at our door and told us the truth, that the adoption had been illegal, that she'd falsified records. She threatened to go to the police to take you away from us. We'd had you for 5 years, Elena. You were our daughter. The thought of losing you was unbearable. So you paid her? Yes. $50,000. Every cent we had in savings. And we told ourselves it would be the last time, that she'd go away and leave us alone. She laughed bitterly. We were so naive. She came back over and over, always demanding more. We took out loans, borrowed from James's retirement fund, and sold my mother's jewelry. We were drowning financially, but we couldn't say no because saying no meant losing you. You could have gone to the police yourself, told them what was happening, and risk having you taken away, risk you being put in foster care while they sorted out the legalities. You would have been 10, 15, 21. At what point do we confess and tear apart your entire world? Linda's voice broke. Maybe we were cowards. Maybe we were selfish. But we loved you, Elena. We loved you so much it made us do terrible things. I believed her. That was the worst part. I believed that she loved me in her own broken way. But love shouldn't require lies. Love shouldn't require asking your child to disappear. Tell me about the wedding, I said. The real reason you asked me to leave? Linda wiped her eyes. Sarah found out you were back in Portland through your social media. She contacted us and demanded $100,000 to stay away from Derek's wedding. We didn't have it. We were already in debt from her previous demands. James and I fought about what to do. He wanted to call her bluff, but I was terrified she'd show up and ruin everything. Not just the wedding, but Derek's future, our reputation, your entire life. So you convinced Dad to ask me to leave instead. It was supposed to be temporary, a few weeks. We thought if you weren't there, she'd back off. And she did. Once we paid her $20,000 and you left town, she disappeared again. But then we didn't know how to bring you back. How to explain why we'd asked you to go. Months turned into years and the distance just grew. You could have called me, texted me, anything. We were ashamed and scared that if we brought you back, Sarah would return. It was easier to pretend you were happy in Nashville, living your own life, not needing us. She looked at me with desperate eyes. But I thought about you every day. I tracked your social media, your art, your friends at the cafe. I sent money anonymously through Derek to make sure you were okay. I wanted to reach out so many times, but I didn't know how. Dad figured it out, I said quietly. He hired the investigator. He found Maggie, Linda nodded. When he got sick, something changed in him. He said he couldn't die knowing he'd robbed 2 mothers of their daughter. He wanted to make it right, even if it meant losing you completely. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Elena, I know I can't undo the past. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I need you to know that being your mother, raising you, was the greatest joy of my life. Even if I got you through terrible circumstances, even if I made horrible choices to keep you, I loved you. I still love you. I know you do, I said, and I meant it. But love isn't enough anymore. You and Dad built our family on lies, and when the truth threatened to come out, you chose the lies over me. You asked me to disappear rather than face the consequences of your choices. I know. I'm so sorry. Maggie told me that real love means doing what's best for the person you love, even when it's hard. You never did that. You always chose what was easiest for you. Linda sobbed openly now, and part of me wanted to comfort her like I had so many times before. But I couldn't, not yet. What happens now? She asked through her tears. Are you going to cut us out of your life? I couldn't bear it if... I don't know what will happen now, I interrupted. I need time, space. I need to figure out who I am without your version of my story constantly defining me. I need to build a relationship with Maggie without feeling guilty about it. And I need you to let me do that without pressure or manipulation. How much time? I don't know. Maybe months. Maybe years. But if you really love me, you'll give me that time. She nodded, crying harder. Whatever you need. I'll wait as long as it takes. I stood to leave, and she stood too, reaching out like she wanted to hug me. I let her briefly and felt her body shake with sobs against mine. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry for all of it. I know, I said. But sorry doesn't fix this. I left the house and didn't look back. That night, I had dinner with Derek and Vanessa at their apartment. Derek apologized again for his role in everything, and I told him I forgave him. He'd been a kid trying to navigate an impossible situation. We weren't going to be as close as we once were, but we were still siblings in the ways that mattered. What are you going to do? Derek asked. Are you going back to Nashville? Eventually. My life is there now. My job, my friends, my cat. I smiled. But I'm going to come back to Portland regularly to see Maggie. Get to know her better. Figure out what kind of relationship we can build. And Mom? I don't know yet. Maybe someday, but not now. The next week I flew back to Nashville. Maggie drove me to the airport, and we made plans for her to visit in a month. She wanted to see my life there, meet my friends, understand who I'd become in the 3 years away from Portland. I'm proud of you, she said, as we hugged goodbye at the departure gate, for how you've handled all of this, for being strong enough to take the time you need. I learned from you, I said. You waited 24 years. I can wait as long as I need to figure this out. Marcus, Riley, and Chloe picked me up from the Nashville airport with a welcome home banner and a care package full of my favorite snacks. Waylon meowed indignantly when I walked into my apartment, clearly offended by my absence, but eventually forgave me and curled up in my lap. I went back to work at the Mockingbird, and June welcomed me with a hug and her signature biscuits. Life resumed its familiar rhythm. Early morning shifts, sketching in the afternoons, pottery classes on Tuesdays. But everything was different too. I had Maggie now, texting me good morning and good night, sending me pictures of her students' artwork, video calling to hear about my day. I had a biological mother who wanted to know me, who'd never stopped looking for me, who loved me without conditions or secrets. I also had Linda and Derek, somewhere in the background, waiting for me to decide what role they'd play in my future. Maybe someday I'd be ready to forgive them completely. Maybe not. But for now, it was enough to know that I had the power to choose. 3 months after returning to Nashville, I got an email from Mr. Morrison. Sarah Brennan had pleaded guilty to 15 counts of kidnapping, fraud, and extortion. She'd been sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. 7 more stolen children had been reunited with their biological families. I forwarded the email to Maggie with a simple message. Justice. She responded, for all of us. I changed my social media to include both surnames, Elena Clark Whitmore. A bridge between 2 identities, 2 families, 2 versions of myself. I was still figuring out who that person was, but for the first time in my life, I felt like I had the freedom to decide. My parents had told me the greatest gift I could give my brother was to disappear. So I did, but in disappearing, I found something more valuable than their approval or their version of family. I found the truth. I found Maggie, and most importantly, I found myself. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the courage to walk away from the lies, no matter how much you love the people telling them. And sometimes, the people who've been looking for you your whole life are the ones who've been there all along, just waiting for you to find them. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.